Speak to, she and I have known each other 55 years.
Oh,
And of that, Jeannie worked at the museum for 50 of those years.
wow.
8 of which were as the site director. So she knows the museum, she knows the captures, their history, and here we are in their beautiful home. What a perfect place to have this conversation. I will tell you that Jeannie is a teacher. She was an avid, a person very, very keen to learn about Madeline's history and to share that with other people. She was a great guide in the museum, and I've always associated the museum with Jeannie. She's a great storyteller, and sometimes she tells many stories. And we're going to get to hear many of those right now. So welcome Jean Alice Teisberg to our podium. Thank you. Did you want to put a
No,
mic
we're just
on?
gonna go like that.
Okay. Well, I have a few notes to try and keep me on track so I don't tell too many stories. I'm very happy to be here because I'm going to be speaking about people that I love and the place that I love to be. So it's just a treat for me. The captures, I got to know the captures when I started working at the museum, but actually everybody and all of the kids on the island knew who the captures were before because of the Gubin, the boat that Leo would drive around and take people out for rides. And then also, he always wore the outfit, which was a red shirt with a white shirt underneath and a blue yellow tie, white duck pants with a belt. And he also had, often on Gubin, a little navy blue captain's cap. So he would wear it every day. And I know exactly what it is because one year I was on the island and Susan Wintage had a party, come as your favorite islander. And I decided I was going to go as Leo Capser. And somebody told Leo that I was going to this party as him. And so there was a knock on my door a couple days before the party, and there were Bella and Leo with the exact outfit, one of his outfits. And both of them came to the door to present me with the outfit and tell me to be very careful with that red shirt because they couldn't get them any longer. And the red shirt was all darned by Bella in the elbows, all of them were evidently. So that was the particular red shirt, and they gave me the cap and the white duck pants and the white shirt and the yellow tie. All I had to do was put a little mustache on. I was good to go, and then I was at the party, and during the party where somebody came as Cigar Nelson, and somebody came as Sally Erickson, and they were all there, and there was a knock at the door, and it was Leo Capser. I knew he couldn't stay away. He wanted to see how I looked. And so he was there with a lantern, and he came in and he said, "I'm Diogenes, and I'm looking for an honest person." So that's how I got to really know what the outfit was. But Leo and Bella had an incredible love for this place, and an incredible love for the people who lived here too. And I did write down a few things so I'd be sure and read it exactly as it's written. In the museum which they built, they have a plaque on the wall that says the Madeline Island Historical Museum. And that is the way they always refer to it, as the Madeline Island Historical Museum. Established in 1958 by Leo W. and Isabella H. Capser and Al Galazen. It's dedicated to the people of La Pointe. And that's the way they did it. They dedicated this to the people of La Pointe. They put things in that would tell stories, artifacts that would help you, lead you to uncover for yourselves by looking at what was used and who was here. You could go through that museum and get the feeling of some sort of idea of what the people were like who were here, or what was important to them, and things, information about how they lived when they were living here on the island. And they did a wonderful job. So I did want to tell you that a little bit, I did do some research so I'd get some of these dates right. And Leo was from Minnesota, and Leo and Bella had one project before they came to build the museum, and that was a project in Minnesota on the St. Croix. Leo and Bella put together a castle near Afton on the St. Croix, and they spent their time. Leo went all around these old buildings that were being taken down, getting the marble, getting the different staircases and different things for his castle. He went all around and gathered all this, and they built a castle, and they called it Villa St. Croix, and it is still standing. And they've really focused on it, and they lived there for a time. But after they sold the castle, they focused on the museum. And what they did was use those techniques that they had used to gather the materials they needed for the castle. They did the same sort of thing for the museum, essentially. They had a little practice run, and that's where they went with that. And the result was the Madeline Island Historical Museum. I did want to tell you a little bit. Leo ran Capser Laboratories, and he was in the Endicott building in St. Paul. And he was in the Navy, and I'm sorry to tell you, it was World War I. And when he was in Europe, he saw those castles. So that's what intrigued him, and that's what sparked him to want to construct a castle. And he and Bella got married later in life, and they never had any children. But Bella was trained in art education, so she was very interested in her artwork too. And they got together, and they worked on this museum, combining different things that were from the area. So starting with the 4 buildings in the museum, each of the rooms is a different building. And the main room was the last room left from the American Fur Company. It dates back to about 1835. At the time they got it, it was being used as a storage shed downtown. And they moved that log building over there and restructured it. And I did mention Al Galazen, and I forgot to say, I was going to say something about him as well, because he was the custodian for the Capsers, and he was also the custodian for the museum for years. And a lot of the basic collection in that main room that you see that was found on the island was part of Al Galazen's collection. Al's family came to Bayfield on a steamer. They were Polish, and his father had been in the Russian army, and later received a summons to go back to the army in Russia at one point, and they decided not to go. So he came over here as a teenager, and he worked when they were logging the island. He took care of, I don't know if they were oxen or horses, or mules or whatever, but he was in charge of that aspect, and then he just decided to stay here. He had a 3rd grade education, but he was a phenomenal historian. He had access to, people gave him permission to go all over the properties, and he spent a lot of his time going through and just plain figuring out. When they talked about in the books, in the history books, about where this had to be, he would figure out where it would have been. And he would go there, and he had his metal detector, and he'd find things. And every archaeological group that came up here to look for anything checked with Al first to see where he thought things were, and then that's where they would work. And so he helped them get that basic, and The other person who was very influential in building the museum was Hamilton Ross, who wrote La Pointe Village Outpost. Leo had been here as a child, and his father, Henry Capser, brought him up here, and they were here for the hay fever era. There was a lot of the earlier summer residents and other families came for that reason. And he was in the mission group when he was 11 years old. They were living down there, and he met Hamilton Nelson Ross, and they grew to be friends. And as Ross was looking up the history and everything, that they became very interested and were involved all the way along in the whole process of his writing the book and Leo putting the museum together. So that was it. And Leo was around when he was a kid, and he also belonged to the clubhouse, although he didn't golf, but he would like to bring people. So when the State Historical Society people would come, he'd take me along with them for lunch, and we'd be there. And I knew he would spend a lot of time, and my mom had been taking me to play duplicate bridge. I was her partner when Dad was in St. Paul, and we were doing some of the duplicate bridge up at the clubhouse, and there were a lot of Leo's friends from the club up there, and I'd be there. And one day he came to visit me in the museum, as he would do. He'd sit in the chair beside me at the front desk. And I said, Leo, why don't you and Bella come up and play in the duplicate bridge? Don't you play bridge? And he said, well, no, I don't play bridge. And I said, well, why not? And he said, when my friends were up here and they were younger, and they spent their summers playing bridge, and I built my house.